Alright, here's the last little video for Chapter 4. This is just on membranes. So we're going to talk about 4 different types of membranes: cutaneous, mucous, serous, and synovial membranes. And it shouldn't really take too long. So let's dive right into the first of our epithelial membranes, the cutaneous membrane, which is the skin. There we go. Didn't want to advance the slide. We're currently in the middle of a whole chapter on skin, chapter whatever that is, 5. So we're going to skip that. And then we're going to move on to mucous membranes. Mucous membranes, you want to know, as it says here, line all of the body cavities that open into the exterior world. So this includes your respiratory tract, as they show it here, as well as your digestive tract, and that runs from one end all the way down to the other end that's not illustrated here. And then also down that end of the body is your urogenital tract, so both male, female urogenital tract, from your urethra all the way up into the kidneys, and certain accessory glands are also going to be lined with a mucous membrane. So mucous membranes have a similar structure. You're going to see that many of them have different epithelia, so they are going to look different, but they all have some sort of epithelium. Underneath it is a basement membrane, and we already talked about basement membranes in the previous video, and then that basement membrane is sitting on top of a piece of tissue, or piece of connective tissue called a lamina propria, which is a form of areolar connective tissue, which we will introduce later in the semester. Also associated with most mucous membranes are goblet cells. As the name implies, they're kind of round in shape like a water goblet, and they secrete the mucus for which the mucous membranes get their name. Here again is just a review of what the basement membrane looks like. I think we won't spend much time on it because we spent time on it before. But just know, if you look over here, it's like this meshwork of proteins, especially like if you look at the red running back and forth in a grid. It's a protein mesh, or a cargo net, if you will, that separates one compartment from another. Not necessarily a watertight barrier, but at least a a barrier that is good at separating cells into different compartments. So then we get into serous membranes. Serous membranes are very simple in terms of their structure. They are just a very simple basement membrane, like we saw here. So a basal lamina, like this right here. So a simple sheet of proteins with a simple squamous epithelium, or a mesothelium, on the surface of them. So going back to whatever week of lab it was, the what am I trying to say? The amphibian mesothelium that we looked at would be an example of that epithelial type. Each of the serous membranes has 2 layers to it. There is a parietal layer, which lines the body wall that membrane is coating, and then a visceral layer, which is glued onto the surface of the organ itself. So when you look at a serous membrane, it looks kind of like this over here. So you want to imagine you have like a half-deflated basketball, and then you take a grapefruit and you push it down into the basketball. Now that basketball forms a 2-layered cover around your grapefruit, where this inner layer here is the visceral. The inner layer is the visceral layer, which will be glued to the surface of the organ, and then the parietal layer lines the inside of the body cavity. You will notice that in between the two is one continuous space, and it's completely sealed off, just like a flattened basketball. So there's a little bit of liquid inside this space, and that allows for the 2 layers of the membrane to slide back and forth across each other with some lubrication so that they don't wear each other out. The easiest way to see the 2-layered arrangement is to look at either the pericardium or the pleura. So here you have 2 layers that surround the heart, or the 2 layers that surround the lungs. When we go to do dissections in anatomy and physiology too. If you open up the chest cavity and sort of peel back the thoracic wall, that shiny membranous layer on the inside of the rib cage is going to be the parietal pleura. And then the visceral pleura will be glued to the surface of the lungs. With the abdominal cavity, if you just cut through the abdominal wall and peel the two sides back and look at all of the organs, you're looking at the organs through the visceral peritoneum. So they're all wrapped in it and suspended in it. And then the parietal peritoneum is glued onto the inside of your abdominal wall. So if you cut right through the whole abdominal wall, you're cutting through that as well. So for the serous membranes, you just want to know that the parietal lines the body wall, the visceral covers the internal organs. There are three of them: the pericardium around the heart, the pleura around the lungs, and the peritoneum that is within the abdominal cavity and coats all of your abdominal organs. And then synovial membranes, you just want to know, are associated with joint cavities, and we will talk more about those when we cover joints in their own chapter. That's it. 623, 624, 625.